You are listening to Dumpster Diving with
Janice
and Jane. And today we are kicking off our fireside chats. Actually, we already had one and it's going to be posting.
we did.
So this is
It was worldwide, actually. Did you know? Like everybody around the world has listened to our fireside. Yeah, everybody around the world has listened to our. So if somebody's hearing that right now, they're like one of few people who haven't heard it. So they're going to need to get on it and go back. Yes.
Oh, well, good, because everybody else is got the memo except for them.
Everybody else. Exactly.
Gotcha.
Exactly.
Yeah. Gotcha. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Well, now we know they're on notice.
Exactly. But it's number 2.
Yeah, well then I'm on notice because I totally forgot about the other fireside chat. But now that's when I remember now because that's when I admitted I was joining a cult in Wisconsin.
Right. I was gonna say that's why the whole world listened, because we're on the edge of our seats about your cult journey.
Well, I came back with a magic potion of COVID. So that put me out for about 2 weeks. The call sign for that trip is we risked it for the biscuit. We went to this little breakfast that had questionable biscuits. They were very dry and hard, but I'm like, these look like they were from yesterday. But we tried to indulge. It wasn't that great. And then by golly, 4 days later, I'm not feeling good. Chris isn't feeling good. And oh boy.
Okay, hold on. You threw out a name that people might not recognize. But I want to point out that for those of you who either missed or heard the first fireside chat about Jane's cult trip, cult trip, I mean her trip to the middle of the God Earth country where she met someone for the first time in some podunk town. So Chris is the cult leader. Now Jane's pretending that, he's just this really cool guy that she's totally into right now. I think he's in charge of her cult. And she says she had COVID, but what I really think happened, everybody, is that she was in Wisconsin all that time under the influence of the cult leader, and then she finally made her way back. But, all of that is circumstantial, hearsay.
Yeah,
from myself.
Circumstantial completely. Yeah. But there's no proof that I actually left after my 11-day stay and came home on or anything. I mean, there's zero track,
zero evidence, zero
camera evidence, CCTV. Yes. I mean, none of that. I was
the FBI
3 weeks. I thought I was going to die, but I came back, and I am.
But you're back now. But you brought your, cult leader with you, not physically, but to our podcast. So, I want everybody to just pray for me right now a little bit because we're going to spend some time with Chris. And I need to make sure I don't end up under the cult influence. So everybody else,
what's funny is, hey guys, hey listeners, I think what Janice just asked is pretty selfish because she wants you to pray for her and not you guys. And we are going to bleed this little cult into the airwaves, and all of you are at risk.
Okay, that's fair. That's actually very fair. All right, we'll be strong together, everyone.
Now.
Let's all be strong. That's right. See? Look, it's been a month and already you're willing to sacrifice anything. So there you go. There you go. How many chickens, Jane, does it take? Really? Okay, goats. Are there goats? What is this?
No, not so much goats. Maybe some ducks or something. I don't know. But those are cute.
Ducks. Oh my gosh, ducks are cute.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, we are way off on a tangent now. Let's bring ourselves back. Back.
So Chris is our special guest today. And the reason for this is our fireside chat follow-up to our suicide awareness episode that will be airing in a couple of days on Monday the 2nd. And so this will come out the following week. But Chris, I mean, everybody knows Chris, and he is my boyfriend. And so everybody knows that I am part of the LGBTQ community, and so is he. So, and we have a very special relationship. It's super cool. I'm super excited. And he is joining us because he knows a lot about and has done a lot of research and actually does some oh my gosh, what's the word? He's an activist for trans rights and everything that goes along with that. So after the awareness episode, I asked that he join us for the fireside chat because he actually known on and pretty well known in the LGBTQ community and trans community on TikTok as trans Jedi, and he does a lot of lives. He does a lot of debates. He's like a self-proclaimed historian. He loves history, and he is also an atheist, and he does a lot of religious debates and stuff like that as well. So he's a very interesting person. He's super cool and loving and everything else, and he is nervous to meet you, Janice.
As well he should be. I'm the big sister, bitch. I mean, hold on. That's come out so harsh, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, and
yeah.
he is coming for Thanksgiving, so get
Oh,
ready.
yay.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it. All right. So this is great. I really am excited because one of the things Jane and I talked about was, even before our episode on suicide in general for Suicide Prevention Month,
Yeah.
and then afterwards when we just talked about like that whole topic is so the whole community, right? LGBTQ community is so affected by that by suicide, and so I'm just so excited to have him here to really share a vision and a perspective that will be incredibly unique. So let's get him in here, man, because
All right.
the waiting is over.
Yeah, let's let him
Bring
in.
it. For those of you who are listening and watching, I'm sitting with my arms crossed, staring. Oh, sorry, there he is. So he's here now, everybody. Everybody, he's here.
Hi.
Unmute yourself, Chris. Unmute yourself. Let's do this, man. Let's do it. How are you? So I promise to be on my best behavior. I also promise to not interrogate you as the big sister until we're in person at Thanksgiving, because it'll be much better then. So,
Fantastic.
We'll see how that goes. But in all seriousness, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, good. We're so glad you're here. So glad you're here. I've decided that, if this all works out well, that it's okay that Jane joined your cult. But if it doesn't, we're gonna have to burn something down, which is why you're at a fireside chat. So anyway, just
our intro,
all kinds of signals.
Our intro, which you didn't get to hear, babe, is how I didn't really have COVID. I was just trapped in the cult for 3 weeks, and I finally clawed my way home.
That's right. Claude. I like that. That's a great visual. Yeah. Claude her way down the 405, like just
love it.
Over the mountains, man. So Chris, Jane actually gave you a really great intro, but we always love for our folks to intro themselves too. So think of something that you think she might not have said and tell us what it is, or just what do you want people to know about Chris as you join the conversation today?
I'm just a normal guy. I mean, I work just like everybody else, but I'm pretty heavily into advocating for trans youth.
Mm-hmm.
It was the whole reason of me starting my TikTok account that I have. I saw the alarming rates of things that were happening to trans youth, so I wanted to do something more.
Love that. That's fantastic. And you live in the Midwest, yeah?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I'm just clarifying that so that we can narrow down your location on a map. I mean, never mind. Just it's good to know. Right? People like to know where people are from, so it's all good. I know you guys have had a precursor, and I know you got a chance to listen to our episode, so thank you for that. We appreciate that. And this is only, as we said before you came in, our second fireside chat ever. And what we love about this new format that we're adding this season is really that it's about like, this is where the hard stuff comes out, right? This is where the stuff that people might be uncomfortable about comes out. This is where the stuff that, and it's a place where we get to, along with the folks like yourself who join us, BT Dubs, you're our first ever fireside chat guest. So going down in history. But no, seriously, like we it's a space where we feel like we have to say the hard things, right? So that so we can create a platform for that. And you clearly are a great first guest in this space because that's what you do already, right? Like you said, via TikTok and all those platforms. So how long have you been on TikTok under that name of Trans Jedi?
Probably about a year and a half.
About a year and a half. So, and what do you like? I know you said your motivation was really giving voice to and advocating for trans youth. Was there anything in particular that kind of led you to making that leap? Was it or was it just kind of a general?
Yeah, so I had just being in the LGBTQ community.
Sure.
I I had already had a lot of followers, and I was in a lot of, live debates. And I had think I think he was 14, um, young 14-year-old trans boy reached out to me and said, it means so much that you're out, in the world showing everybody that we're normal and there's no reason to stigmatize us. He's like, I have parents that don't, agree with this, and it's very hard for me.
Yeah.
I have no one to talk to. And so I mentored him for a while. And when I say mentor, I just gave him, someone to talk to.
Right.
And I got to thinking, maybe TikTok isn't just for silly videos. Maybe it's a place where I can try to change someone's mind. So that's how it all started.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's amazing. And what do you feel like when you look back at the last year and a half, then is there a particular moment or conversation you had or interaction you had with somebody that you're most, I'm going to say most proud of, but you know what I mean? You feel really was high impact.
Yeah. So there was a Native American guy. I think Jane actually was listening to this live. There was a Native American. Yeah, there was a Native American guy, and he got on there. He's like, I don't believe in this stuff. I was raised totally different in the Native American ways, and he didn't get it. So after sitting talking with him and explaining to him, the psyche of trans folks and the breakdown of genetics, he got it a million times more. And we ended up having a 45-minute conversation, live on TikTok. But normally it's people come in, they say something ignorant, and then they leave. But this guy actually wanted to learn.
Wow.
And that's kind of the moments that I live for, the people who actually want to learn.
Yeah.
Well, and in particular, that person, that individual spoke about two spirits and how the Indian culture, and what they would do is they have the males, the females, and then the two spirits. And so the two spirits are the ones that are transgender, and they separate them all, they teach them all, but they teach them all how to respect each other and everything. And that's how, and so it was normal,
Right.
and still to this day they do that. And I didn't know that was a thing, and I was educated by him then. And I was like, he was there arguing this point, but then turned around, and once Chris talked about the DNA aspect or the genetic aspect of some people and stuff like that, he was like, oh wow, oh okay, well this is how we handle it. And he made the connection, and I thought that was so cool.
That's really amazing. So I can see how those moments are incredibly impactful, right? When you actually see, and I love that the way you said that he didn't come to just drop a bomb and leave. He came to learn something, right? And it's, part of what we talk about all the time is this idea that we have to talk about these things in a way that invites other people in, right? Because otherwise, where the hell are we at the end of the day? So our last episode then was, as kind of our way to create some space around the topic of suicide. And it was focused a lot on kids and parents and that kind of stuff. And, we really appreciate that in this fireside chat, we're going to, kind of listen to you as really our episode's expert in terms of how suicide impacts the LGBTQ community. By the way, so last week, random tangent, birdwalk, it connects, I promise. Last week, we got a letter from our youngest is a junior here in San Diego Unified, and we got a letter from the superintendent about the LGBTQIA community. And I had to look it up because I was like, all right, people, I barely got a grasp on the LGBTQ letters, and now I've got 2 more letters. What the?
Oh, there's more than that.
Oh my God. All right, just one at a time. So, okay, I want to start there then, and then I want you to jump into all your statistics. But so the IA, I was like, okay, I love Google, right? I just went and looked. I was like, okay, I get it. I get why both of those are important letters to add to this. But I literally had never heard it before. So what else is there? And I think about that from the perspective of somebody who wants to learn to make sure that I'm honoring. So
right. So you got LGBTQIA, and then you have and help me out here. Then there's like androgynous,
Yeah.
ally. There's another one that I'm
I've
missing.
heard
I know.
ally now that you say that. Yep.
Mhm.
And then non-binary, I believe, was
Yeah.
another one they put in there.
Yeah, non-binary. And now, I mean,
Okay.
they have asexual, but but that's different, you know, non-binary. Yeah.
Right.
So,
Well, and at some point, maybe, I mean, let's think about this in terms of another episode down the road, but to come back to maybe digging into why that's so important, right? Why each of those are so important and so contributing. So we'll put a pin in that and come back to it. But and actually that the whole point of him sending that letter, and it actually contributes to this a little bit, was that, you know, here in the state of California, what's happening is, like, in the way the law is written right now in California from a student privacy perspective, is that only a parent can change a child's records, right? So if a child identifies as a different gender than what's in their school records, that can't be changed. However, a kid can come to school and say, I'm a girl or I'm a boy. And the staff are going to honor that, right? The staff are going to say, what's your name? Like, okay, let's go on board. Well, because of some of the things that have been happening in our state and some of the groups who have, you know, come into school board positions and are dominating their districts all over the state, Chino is one of them, where they're trying to actually put in a school board rule that says, and get a law passed, right, that says parents have to be required to be notified. And all hell is breaking loose. And so the superintendent here, and I love this, sent a letter home last week to say, this is what it is, and we will continue to honor the privacy of students, right? We know what the line is. We can't change a record, but we will continue. And the governor supports that. And, you know, a federal judge just blocked a board's attempt to require that, et cetera. So it's a very hot topic. I'm going with our background here with our fires right now in terms here in California, and I'm sure probably in some other places too.
Yes.
Yeah.
And people don't realize that laws like that, the groups like that, what they're actually doing to the trans youth and really to the LGBTQIA youth, it's only raising the suicide rate, suicide attempts even more.
Yeah. So let's dig in, man. So where is a good place do you feel like to start for our audience to kind of better understand this relationship between suicide and the community?
Trevor Project's the biggest one. They are hyper focused right now on the LGBTQ youth and trans youth because the rate is so high, and it just keeps getting worse.
Well, didn't you say, babe, that there are some LGBTQ or what is it? There are some oh my gosh, groups that don't even recognize the trans community at all, and they claim to be LGBTQ, but they're not. They do everything, lesbian and gay, and maybe that's about it.
The HRC, they're one of the worst. The HRC.
All right, what is that?
So that's the Human Rights Campaign. They're supposed to be like big LGBTQIA people, but if you go to Pride, so we just finished going to Madison Pride maybe a month ago. And when we went, I made the observation to the lady at the HRC tent that how sad is it that you have to have a trans alliance and transgender booth right next to you because you have nothing for the trans community at your booth. And she was like, well, we help the trans community. I said, wouldn't it be nice for you to reflect that at your booth? And she had nothing to say.
So is that a kind of a historical thing? I don't know. Obviously, I know nothing about it. So is there...
So I would say in the 70s and 80s, it was not historical because without trans women, there would be no gay rights. There would have been no Stonewall. And there is a movement right now in the community to have T dropped from everything.
In which community?
In the gay community, in the lesbian, gay, bi, transgender, queer community. There is a big push to drop the T because it's getting such negative stigmatism right now that it's drawing more attention, and they think that it's hurting the community instead of helping, instead of, getting behind us like we have for the community for years.
Right. That's discouraging to hear, and I'm sure we could probably talk about like 27 days about the history of that and fleshing that out. And you made a couple of historical references that my guess is a lot of people are gonna be Googling, right, myself among them, in terms of like better understanding, because I don't want to derail this conversation. But so tell us a little bit then, some of the, I know you've got like lots of statistics and stuff like that. What are some of the things we want to focus on in terms of the impact of all of this on our trans youth, especially?
Sure. So trans youth. So if you look at youth as a whole, right? It's the second leading cause of suicide in this country. Trans and, well, let's start with LGBTQ youth are 4 times more likely to attempt or consider suicide. When you consider we're really only like 1.1% of the population, trans youth is 41%.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. And I believe the statistic was one trans kid every 45 seconds attempts or considers suicide.
Wow.
That's an alarming rate.
That's insane.
That's a hugely alarming rate. So Chris, is that like, and again, I admit very much being a novice, right? My only experience here is as an educator, right? And even then, very little experience with the T in that community, because that was 13 years ago. And so we did not see a lot of people who were openly acknowledging, right, that in public schools, even that recently. And so, I mean, based on your experience and all the people you've talked with, et cetera, what do you feel is at the core of that? Like, what's behind that?
I would say the negative rhetoric being passed around. The really bad negative, saying that, we're grooming children, we're having children, cut off their parts, or feeding them hormones, which is absolutely ridiculous. That does not happen ever, ever, ever. I mean, you have to go through years of therapy before you can even attempt to go on hormone blockers, let alone T or estrogen. It just doesn't happen. And nobody under the age, I believe it's 14 or 15, and that's just to have top surgery. Right? And that's only after 2 PhD therapists, your doctor, and your parents have signed off.
Right.
So the rhetoric is not helping. And what it's actually doing is it's causing these kids to feel like they have nowhere else to go.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it's ending lives. Since I've been on TikTok, I have watched, Matthew, the kid that I used to mentor, he's disappeared. Don't know where he went. And this was somebody that was on TikTok every single day.
Oh, wow.
He's gone. Can't find him. His account's not active. 3 other transgender youths have committed suicide in the last year and a half since I've been on TikTok that I know personally on.
Wow. I'm so sorry. I mean, I can't even imagine the impact that must have on you.
It's horrible.
Yeah.
It's absolutely horrible. I mean, I've had, even when I go to prides, I think this was my first pride where I could like take my shirt off and be out in the crowd. I was treated fantastic here, but just moving here from Tennessee where my mother lives, no way could you go to Pride. They had to cancel Pride because the Proud Boys promised to show up. And it's illegal to be transgender in Tennessee.
Still, now.
Oh, yes. Yes, it's very much illegal. You can't even be a drag queen in Tennessee.
What?
Yes, it is illegal.
Out.
Yeah, they are.
Seriously, that I've done. Not be drag queen, but go to the shows. And that,
I love and so what they did is the real thing they wanted to do was to get rid of transgender folks, because what they really did was they wrote into that law that banned drag queens. They wrote into the law any person wearing clothes not of their gender. It is a class 2 felony.
What about Halloween, man? Sorry.
What
I know
the fuck?
That is messed up. So while you're talking, right, I had pulled up a few things in anticipation of this conversation, because what you're shedding light on is the last year and a half is what you've said, right? Since you've been in this space in TikTok. Sure. And I, you know, as just a regular person going about their day, and by regular I mean like I don't hold any positions in the, you know, my community that are of note or anything like that, but I pay attention. And I know that these groups that you're talking about are on the rise right now across this country. So I pulled up a quick map, right? So if you look at a map of the United States in terms of laws that have been proposed that are restricting trans, that are directed toward trans youth and specifically, if you pull up that map from 2021, nothing. You look up that map 2 years later, and there are 13 states that have laws on the books now. And there's another, I'm looking at it while I'm talking to you, 4 or 5, right? Yep. That have them in the works. And many of them, to your point, are geared toward even preventing parents from taking the steps to support their child's identity.
In Florida, it's actually illegal, and they will take your child. I know people that have had their children taken from them because they supported their child's gender.
And that's where, right, that's where it gets all fucked up, right? Because, you know, many of us are still, if not all of us, are still reeling from the Roe v. Wade, right, being overturned, right, and all of the abortion laws that came as a result of that. And so I'm sitting here in my head trying to synthesize, like, so first you took back away our right to be in charge of our own bodies, right? And you said it's because every fetus is a baby, every child is a soul, everybody should be born, right? And then now once they're here, we've decided that a small group of people in this country get to decide things like every single person's gender identity, every single person's gender identity. And as children, we've decided you're not intelligent enough as a parent yourself to make those decisions. So we're going to do it for you. And again, I'm going to say this because I said it with the abortion piece, with zero anything to come with it, right? We're going to tell you what to do, but we're not going to fund anything. We're not going to develop systems to support you. We're not going to do any of that. We're just going to tell you what you can and can't do. What the fuck?
Yeah.
Well, it's because they only care about them before they're born. After they're born, they don't care.
Exactly. We got to keep those taxpayers coming into the system. You don't want to get rid of them.
And if your kid happens to be LGBTQ, they really don't care about.
Right. Oh, yeah. Right. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And it is, you know, the systemness of it is really quite terrifying. And so what I really value about this conversation is that, you know, we're going deeper with the topic of our youth and the real kind of critical, if you will, level we're at in terms of suicide. And we're getting to focus in on a specific group who now you've just shared a few statistics that are like
alarming.
You know, right. I mean, like
that's not even the worst one yet.
Oh God. Because even with the ones you shared, Chris, it's like, so if I'm a parent and my kid comes to me tomorrow and says, you know, I think I'm going to support my kid doing all the things, but in my head, I'm going to go, oh my God, you just tripled your likelihood of committing suicide. Right. That's what, like, the fear that's going to come for me is not going to be about their identity change. It's going to be about the fear of knowing that that's the world they live in right now.
Well, and not even that. Lord forbid they tell you that they're trans and anybody else finds out, then you have to worry about what happens to them when they walk outside the door.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. So Jane, I'm almost thinking, what do you think? Like, maybe, right? Because we're making a lot of assumptions right now, having this conversation about people's level of understanding. And I know on one hand, we want to really be laser focused on suicide. On the other hand, I want to make sure we're bringing everybody along. So does it make sense to you that we like just back up a little bit maybe, and like Chris, you just said, for example, and if they say they're trans, that's a whole, I can imagine there are probably people out there going, oh, okay, all right, what's different, right? What's the difference between changing your identity or being trans or what have you? Does it make sense to comment on that?
Yeah,
exactly. Let's do it. And you two are the experts here. I'm going to shut up. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, statistic wise, I would love Chris to share, but I mean, just personally, so your question, tell me your question again.
So my question is, it's starting to pour down rain in freaking sunny San Diego, so I keep muting myself because I don't know if you can hear it. My question is, how about let's do a little kind of run through of terms and definitions so people know like what's the difference between being trans versus changing my identity? Like what I imagine they're probably think they're the same thing, or like what's the I think most people probably understand lesbian, gay, right? That those basics, but what's the things that you feel like people probably would need some clarification on?
I would definitely say queer is a fun one because it means a lot. It's not normal, so what's it's not male and female, so it would be anything other than male and female. And what does that mean? I mean, that could mean a lot of things. People that are into BDSM, that's queer. It could be,
that's your sexuality, not your gender.
Sexuality, right? Not gender wise, but
wait, hold on. I'm a novice. That's new to me. Seriously, because I've always wondered about the Q, and I've always like I to say that word out loud feels like an insult, and so I know it's not, because otherwise the freaking letter wouldn't be in the list, right? So right. I'm so glad you just said that. So queer actually, Chris, you said refers more to a person's sexuality. It's not about okay, all right,
right,
got it. Moving on. I got it. We got this. Let's go. Next letter.
Let's do it. Exactly. So then, Chris, I would love for you to explain intersex.
That's me.
What does that mean?
We're gonna need a little more.
I am the I and the T.
Okay.
I was born intersex. So if you were to run my genetics, right? Okay. I am XXY.
Okay.
So male, but was born with female parts.
Got it.
So like everybody else in the 80s, they had no idea what that meant.
Yeah.
And they said, well, you got girl parts, you're a girl. But that wasn't technically true.
Got it.
I was a guy with girl parts. So as I got older, the one good thing that my mother did was she let me explore my own self.
Okay.
When I hit puberty is when it became very clear that I was not a girl. Girls don't grow facial hair, chest hair. They just don't. I mean, I guess some do. But.
Yeah.
Well, some do, but you know what? That's very sensitive. Okay, there's a lot of wax.
Never asked them.
Sensitive, but yeah, the majority don't grow full beards.
Right. Right.
So, as I got older, I transitioned, and medically transitioned by having top surgery and things like that, and legally have transitioned to male.
So I'm going to review that really quickly because I'm an educator. That's what we do. So intersex means I genetically am one gender, but I have the parts of another gender.
Or genetically, you're both. Because
genetically, you're both. Right. Got it. See, that's why I'm repeating it, because we get it wrong. So genetically, you're both, but you have male, one part, right? Either the female or the male parts. And so for you, the way that revealed itself was that, like you said, as you went through puberty, and then you were able to kind of say, okay, this is who I am and pursue. Right. But that doesn't mean you're not still intersex, which is why you said I'm the T and the I, because that's always going to be true of you. Okay.
And how one part he left out, and how he transitioned twice is that they decided at birth that he was going to be a girl. And so they raised him as a girl and gave him estrogen. And so it made him develop breasts and stuff like that. And then once he went off of it, his testosterone kicked in naturally. And that's where everything came from. And so that's how he transitioned twice, because he was really a boy. Then they made him a girl, and then transitioned back to male.
Correct.
So when you're born, your parents knew you were intersex.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
There were signs. Yeah.
There were
definite signs.
Okay, all right. So there are indicators. So doctors know that, then parents know that, etc.
Right, yeah.
And then and I feel like that's a story I've heard before. The idea that it's like the parents chose what gender, and then, but for you, in your case, you eventually chose your own, like you identified differently and then went through that. Holy crap, man, that's a lot to go through, dude.
Yeah, 2 puberties.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because they're
But,
so fun the first time. Let's do it
that's
again.
why puberty blockers are so important for trans kids, because who wants their kid to go through 2 puberties? It's horrible.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because that is some of the stuff that's on the legal battleground. And on the other side of it, they try to make it sound like it's not a big deal. But to your point, like it's actually really significant in the life of a trans kid. So at what point, Chris, then, when somebody says, I have a trans kid, right? Or I'm a trans kid, like at what point when we use that term, does that term come into play when a child, for whatever reason, right, begins to identify as a gender that's different than the physical parts they have?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
so a lot of kids usually start with, oh, I'm non-binary,
Okay.
because it's more comfortable for them. They could be
Yeah.
both. And then as they get a little older as kids, in their teens, they usually find themselves and where they figure themselves out.
Yeah.
And the kids, if they feel safe, hopefully, will tell somebody close to them, I'm transgender. This is how I feel. And that's usually how someone knows. I mean, telltale signs, if a girl dresses as a boy, doesn't like being called, if their name's Stephanie, they don't want to be called that. Those are telltale signs. They just haven't quite figured it out. I knew by 5 years old that I was not supposed to be who I was.
Tell us a little bit about that, if you don't mind. Again, I know we're not staying on the whole suicide thing. We're going to come back to that. But I think that people understanding your journey more helps them understand the whole topic more.
Exactly.
So I did nothing as a girl. I may have looked like a girl. Well, I don't think I did. I think I looked like a boy with
I've seen the pictures. You were a cute little girl.
Oh.
But I didn't do anything girly. I played baseball. I played football. I climbed trees. I worked on cars. There was nothing I did girly.
Right. Which, by the way, and I'm going to say this out loud because we know we're going to have people who say, but. I mean, there are plenty of women who grew up that way and are women because that's just what they prefer, right? So we're not suggesting that because a girl does all these things, that means it just means that was your experience. Continue.
Right. Yeah, that was just my experience. I know some awesome women that do all those things.
Of course.
But I knew, because when I looked in the mirror, I didn't see the person that was in here.
Yeah.
The person in here was this little boy and really good at sports and everything else, but I was a girl. Yeah. So I kind of figured it out. And then as I got a little older and I started paying more attention at the doctor's office, I was like, wait a minute, what's wrong with me? I was like, because at first they had me on liquid medication, which was horrible. It was the worst tasting thing on the planet.
Yeah.
And then as I became a teenager, I finally got to decide what I wanted to do. And the doctor, told me exactly what it was. We went to like the leading doctor endocrinologist in Florida, and she told me what I had. And she was like, well, technically you're not a girl. You're technically a boy. And I was like, what? So I had to go through that. I was 13 at that time.
So your parents didn't, you were taking this medicine all along, but your parents didn't tell you.
They didn't tell me why.
Yeah.
I had no idea why. I just knew I had to take this. That was it.
Yeah.
So at 13, they finally told me what it was. I believe it was Florinef that I took, which is estrogen. And so I was like, well, I guess we can go with that, because I didn't quite know, but I knew.
Yeah.
And so my mom was still calling the shots. So we took that, and, she told me at that time, she's like, you'll never be able to have kids. You're sterile. You'll never be able to have kids. She's like, there's a good chance that you're going to go through puberty twice if you decide to stop being on medication. And, my mom always told me, oh, if you get off of this medication, you'll get very sick. And I'm like,
oh, wow.
That don't sound right.
Right.
So when I was 18, I was like, I'm done with this. My body feels like it's fighting itself. I gained a ton of weight. I was like, I'm done. I'm done with this. And so I stopped taking medication, and then facial hair grew in, everything grew in, and it all fell into place.
Oh, wow.
My hair started falling out. Like, I was the boy I was supposed to be.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
it made more sense. And then I did research on my own, and I became a participant in a CAH study, which is congenital adrenal hyperplasia, which is what I have. And that opened my eyes to so many people. 1 in 1,500 people have what I have.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And that makes up a large population of
Yeah.
transgender people.
Right.
Wow. Wow. That is, thank you so much for sharing that. And as you're talking, honestly, Chris, I'm sitting here thinking to myself, 13, right? Like I joke all the time, and I think I've said on this show that, you know, if a girl can survive 7th grade, she can survive anything, right? And that's that 13, 14, 12, 13-year-old, because it's hell, man. Even under all of the best possible conditions, right? It's freaking hell. And so to think about somebody seriously in your position who then, on top of just all the regular shit that comes with that age, has that in there, you know, and you didn't even, I mean, so at that point, that's when you're learning all this shit. And I'm thinking, oh my God. And then, you know, you had to go to school the next day and deal with all the regular 7th, 8th grade bullshit, right? Like,
Yep.
Holy crap. And so that kind of leads us back to the really hard part of this, that no fucking wonder, you know? And so that's enough as it is. But then we layer on top the people in the world who've decided they should be the ones who, you know, tell us what is right and wrong and make decisions.
Yep. It's an alarming rate. Like I said, I haven't even told you the worst ones.
All right, let's hear it. Keep going.
All right, so you know how I said 45%, right? 45% of youth for the LGBTQ. Can you guess the percentage for trans youth and just trans people in general?
The percentage of people who commit suicide?
Who have committed suicide or attempted?
Or attempted. Jesus Christ. I don't want to guess.
Keep in mind, we're only 1.1% of the population.
I don't want to guess. I'm already terrified.
Jane, you already know the answer because I told you.
Yeah.
All right. What is it?
82%.
Jesus. So wait a second. 82% of the trans population either do or attempt it. And there you go, right? Like that's all we got to know what we're doing is not working. Right? Not working.
Yeah, and 41% of that is youth.
Yeah. 82% and 41% of it is youth. And so that actually speaks volumes too, Chris, because I'm thinking to myself, like, so you make it all the way through teenage years. You get into your early 20s. Well, actually, before I say that, like, is there an average, and I don't know if this is something you've been off the top of your head, but an average age at which people tend to transition if they're going to transition?
If they're going to, well, it's probably different now. Now it's
definitely different now.
It's different now. Like for me, I was in my 20s.
Okay.
Look at Caitlyn Jenner. I mean, he was like what?
Yeah.
Like
Jenner.
In his 60s.
Jenner. Yeah.
Although Caitlyn Jenner is not seen nicely by the trans community.
Well, it doesn't matter. She's
but yes,
trans.
They were what are they in their 60s?
Yeah, 50s or 60s, you know.
Yeah.
Early 60s, and I only remember that because for some reason I looked that up recently. I can't remember. Maybe it was thinking about this. I don't remember, but so yeah, that's a very good point. But I think probably, I mean, who knows? Maybe lots of people in their 60s are transitioning. We don't hear about them because they're not famous. But okay. But you were in your early 20s. Do you
early 20s? Had surgery, you know, a couple years ago.
So. Okay. Is the trend now though that we're seeing it at younger ages? Because we're certainly hearing about it a lot more right now. That's also because there are groups out there trying to stop it. But
I think we hear about it more because now you have Gen X raising kids.
Amen.
And they're not about the hate.
Yep.
So I think, you know, my generation, your generation, Jane's generation is kind of done with that whole boomer mentality.
Yeah, yeah.
And nothing against boomers.
No, love them.
My dad was a boomer and he was amazing. I think we're done with that, and we're raising the next generation of people who are now, lack of better words, could give two shits whether you like them or not. they're going to do what they want to do.
Right.
You know, you got your Zillennials and your Gen Alpha that
Yeah.
are just charging forward, and they're not taking the hate anymore.
Yeah.
So I think that youths feel more accepted now
Yeah.
and able to come out. But I still think there's a long way to go, because I mean it's a crazy alarming rate. I mean, even with, you know, POC people, people of color is at like 51% in the trans
Yeah.
community. I
Yeah.
mean, it's so bad. And it's
I
only getting worse.
So within the trans community, 51% of people of color who are also in that community that's their attempted or suicide rate.
Yes.
God. So, I mean, you know, honestly, we know, like, it's not rocket science. We know that a lot of what drives how people act in this system in terms of all of these things, right? A lot of it's driven, well, I shouldn't even say that. The assumption I make is that a lot of it's driven by fear and lack of understanding, right? But the frustrating part is that there's not a whole lot of an excuse anymore about lack of understanding, because the freaking world is at your fingertips. If you want to better understand, if I wanted to know what the freaking IA was at the end of that list when the superintendent sent that letter, I went and freaking Googled it, right? Like, I didn't have to go find an encyclopedia or wait till I saw somebody else. I could literally find out in 5 seconds. So I have, my tolerance for lack of understanding is quickly decreasing. But the trend, right, to see, so we know so much more than we ever have before. All of the procedures and the things that have to happen for a person who, you know, identifies and understands themselves to be a different gender and has to go through all that, right? It's already hellish, even when you go through it willingly, because there's so much involved medically. And it's all really safe. And so, you know, you kind of come back to, maybe it's fear because some people just fear what's different than them. But I'm just sitting here in my head trying to think about, like, how we start to get people who are behind freaking 13, 18 states now, either passing laws or having laws that are trying to be passed that restrict this. Like, how do we change the narrative, right? Because what we're going to need are other people. We're going to need everybody else out there understanding that, right? And speaking up. So it's like, how do we change the narrative?
Doing it right now.
Yeah, that's how you do it. You sit down. I'm a big proponent for, and I've always said this. I say it on the lives all the time, that if everybody put their egos and pride aside and sat down at a table and actually had a conversation, open-hearted conversation, it would solve a lot of this country's problems.
Yeah.
But until we get rid of this, you know, fake news, MAGA mindset, it's never going to happen, because they're pushing that we're abusing kids, you know, we're recruiting them, which is absolutely ridiculous. You can't recruit somebody to be trans.
Yeah.
We're brainwashing them. Grooming them was the big one. I'm like, are you kidding me right now? How do you groom somebody? And I flip it around on them. I'm like, how did you get groomed to be straight?
Well, there, right. I love that so much, Chris. Like, I feel like, first off, there's a part of me that's like, wouldn't it be incredible if we eventually could be a world where a kid doesn't actually have to come out?
Yes.
Because nobody predetermines what their sexuality is, right? For example, right? And same thing with gender, right? That we don't actually predetermine it, right? That we're not so caught up in it. You know, wouldn't that be kind of an amazing place to live? And I, you know, I agree with you, like, having those kinds of conversations. And so I love that you guys both said, this is it, right? We have to talk about it. We have to open the door to it, because I really am sitting here thinking to myself, like, why does it matter? Like, if it's not your kid, right?
Right.
Like, I really am, like, there are people who are putting God knows how much money behind creating laws that really are discriminating, right?
They're all they're all Christian based. And it's so funny because I have a good friend on TikTok. His name is Mr. Jones. He literally has like a bachelorette, and he's a psychologist, and he has completely studied the how do you say it, theological studies.
Yeah.
He has studied all of the religions, right? And so when people get up there and they're like, well, it's against God's law, and he's like, really, have you read the Bible? He's like, because there's so many trans people in the Bible.
Yeah.
He's like, what are you talking about? He's like, are you kidding me? And he'll flip it around on them, and they're like, well, it's just immoral. And he was like,
Right.
what's immoral? He's like, it says in the Bible, you're not supposed to eat shellfish. Do you do that? That's immoral. Do you wear clothes of different cloths? That's immoral.
Exactly.
Have you been divorced? That's immoral.
Yeah.
He was like, stop listening. And he calls him Sky Daddy. It's hilarious.
That's
and I am all about, and I have always said this, I'm very respectful of everybody's religion. I am all about everybody believing something that gives them faith and uplifts them.
absolutely.
Where I draw the line is where you start making laws against me based on your religion.
That's exactly right. Right. At the end of the day, that's it. And I think that and I just feel like any argument that's based on what the Bible says, I can't, like, that can't be, for me, that can't be the basis of your argument, right? So I, like you, I respect everybody's beliefs. I have my own faith, but to your point, I'm a big believer that my faith, the moment it impacts you believing what you believe, I have stepped away from any kind of God or what have you that would, would be. But you keep saying that example of, excuse me, grooming. And another story that I heard, and so let me, again, for our listeners, I cannot remember the source, so it could be bullshit, but it was an article or something, and it was about this idea that it was an article that was about one of these things that's happening in California in terms of the thing I said earlier about schools basically saying, listen, we're going to protect a kid's privacy, because if they're not telling their parents, there's got to be a reason.
Right.
But we won't change their records because we can't do that because that's against the current law. Right. And embedded in it was this idea that the reason schools are doing that is because schools want, what are they doing? It was along the grooming lines of schools are encouraging more kids to be trans. And so they're saying, like, a kid, so the example was like, so a kid might come and say, Mrs. Case, I think I'm gay. And Mrs. Case is saying, oh, no, you're not gay. You're just trans. Because trans means that maybe you're going to have sex with the other gender. What the fuck? And I read it, and I was like, do people seriously think, poor Joe?
They do, because they think that gender and sex are the same thing.
That's exactly right, Chris. But my thing was like, do they seriously think people in schools have time for this shit? Like, right. I can assure you, nobody has time to set aside for Johnny to try to convince Johnny to be trans. Like trust me, I can promise you, on one hand, schools are a place, and it's not universal. Every school is full of people, and people are all right. Nothing is universal. But in the cases where you have people who are accepting and supportive and whatever, when those people are having a kid come to them, I can assure you what they're thinking is, A, how do I help you? And B, damn, this is going to be hard, right? Because they know all the battles that are going to come, right? But then you still do what you got to do. So anyway, I'm with you on the whole misinformation, all the things. And so I love that when you're engaging folks in these lives, that you're saying, so what's your evidence? Oh, it's Bible.
None of them can bring it up.
Right.
I'm like, what's your source? Put it on the camera. I'll even look it up for you. What's your source? And they're like, oh, I don't got it. Or they'll show it like in Tennessee, where they tried to say that, these drag queen story hours, that they were doing inappropriate things. And I'm like, oh my gosh, they sat there in a dress and read a princess story?
Right.
Don't we hire people to do that? Come to birthday parties and princess
please?
Like, yeah. Do you take your kids to Hooters, Twin Peaks,
There you go.
Disney World.
Right.
Yeah.
Just saying.
There you go. It's all, I mean, it is, there's no question the fear is such a driving factor. So when you think then about like, you know, because unfortunately we can't solve all the problems of the world, but we can for the people who listen, say like, what can you do, right? Like, I think one of the things Jane and I've committed to with these fireside chats, because they're going to be hard, is to say, but so what can you do, right? So what do you think? What are some things folks can be doing?
Listen to your kids when they tell you that they don't feel right, no matter what age they are. Listen to them. Just because your 5-year-old comes up to you and says, "Hey, I don't want to be called Timmy anymore. I'd like to be called, Crystal." Who cares? Call them Crystal. It may or may not just be a momentary thing. Who knows?
Right.
Just listen to them. They know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
They're
They
trying
know
to
what
get
they're talking
themselves out.
Yep. And stop voting for assholes.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen. Which means you have to start paying attention, right?
Yeah. And that's half the problem. People just, oh, I'm voting along the party line. I'm independent. I'll vote on both sides. If the Democrat that's there
Yep.
is not doing their job and not protecting the people, guess what? I go the other way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. It's got to be about the person and what their track record is, right? Really understanding
Yep.
what it is they fundamentally believe, which is hard because I know people are like, that takes time. And now I have to research about. It's the least we can do, right? It's like one time a year.
Laws.
Yeah. One time a year, we ask you to pay attention and actually go in there and understand who's running and what they believe in and make sure that it represents what you believe in. And so, yeah, I agree with you. I love that.
Look at the Supreme Court overturning, the Marriage Equality Act.
Yep.
That included marriage to people not of the same race as you.
Right.
Clarence Thomas is married to a white woman.
Exactly.
Huh?
It doesn't. In fact, honestly, the fact that we have laws about marriage at all, that's a whole other fireside chat, people. Whole other fireside chat. Like,
amen. Yeah. We have a whole theory on that.
What a waste of resources, man. What a waste of resources. So Chris, what haven't we asked you, man, as we wrap up? What's something that you want to make sure that everybody in the world hears? Because if you didn't hear, everybody in the world listen to our first fireside chat, like everybody. So babies were listening.
All in our cult.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice. I would just say, don't be so close-minded. Or open your mind to more possibilities than what you see on the news, talked about with your friends. That trans kid is actually going through something. I always tell people, you never know what another person's going through.
Amen.
So just be kind.
Yep.
And just be a good person. That's free. That's free. That doesn't take any effort. Just be a good person. Because even trans people go through stuff. I mean, obviously, the statistics are there.
Exactly.
So, I mean, get educated. There's plenty of places you can get educated. Trevor Project. Unfortunately, the HRC, even though they don't do a very good job of it.
Yeah.
We've got the Trans Alliance. If you want real information, John Hopkins, that's actually where I got all my transitions surgeries. They actually have a trans center.
Oh, wow.
On John Hopkins, Baltimore.
Yeah.
On their website, they actually have a center and you can get all the information on honest information.
That's it.
On the procedures and the steps and everything else. I mean, me, even as an adult, I had to go through 2 PhDs and get their okay and my doctor's okay before I could do anything.
Oh, wow. I love that. I love that you're sending people to Johns Hopkins because to your point, like, you can't Google this shit, man, right? You can't just Google and say, there's just too much crap out there. So I love that you're sending people to a scientific medical source to say, they're going to tell you exactly what it is. They're not going to tell you what they think about it, right? They're just going to say, here's what it is. So that's a beautiful site. So we're going to put all this stuff, Jane, right in the notes of the episode.
Yeah, he sent it over to me, so we'll put it in the notes so everybody has that information. So
what do you think in final word, Jane?
Thank you. I appreciate you. He was so nervous.
Good. I mean,
he's like, I'm meeting your sister for the first time. And I'm like, so what?
Yeah.
I've only known her for a year. Who cares? And he's like, no.
Hold on a second. That might be true, but Chris clearly is smart enough to understand that means I have a lifetime of big sister behavior to exhibit in a very short window. So
Short
smart man,
window. Speak for yourself,
Smart.
older sister.
She's such a baby. God. You know what? Seriously, thank you for being a part of this conversation and for shedding some
Absolutely.
light here. We're gonna put all your stuff. Everybody should be going to TikTok and following Trans Jedi. That's Chris. You're gonna be able to be firsthand on some of his lives and really listen into some of the ongoing conversations he has. We know he's gonna be back because he leads a cult, and cult leaders kind of wiggle their way in. Like they
Yes.
just weasel in there, right? You know what I'm saying? But we know you'll be back, and you know, everybody needs to go like and share and subscribe and do all the
Yes.
things on all the different platforms. We have a whole lot more obviously coming at you in the next few months as we continue plowing through season 2. So thanks everybody for being here and listening and being part of the Dumpster family, man. Dumpster
Yeah.
family. Thanks, Chris. You're the best, dude.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.